all, we can get started when y'all are ready.
I think we can go ahead and start the webinar. Thanks, Erin.
We are live.
Hey everyone, this is Katie from Texas Counts. Welcome back to our weekly update. We are so excited to have you join us again on this Monday, July 6th. We just opened up the webinar and went live on Facebook, so we're going to give it a minute or two for folks to hop on or tune in, and then we'll get started. But thanks again for joining us today. All right, friends, we are going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. This is Katie from Texas Counts. We are so excited to have you joining us today for this week's weekly update for the week of July 6th. As you know, I am joined by two of my fabulous census colleagues and friends. First, Dr. Lila Valencia from the Texas Demographic Center, and then Genesis Sanchez from the NALEO Educational Fund. Can we pop forward 2 slides, please? For today's agenda, if you've joined us before, you know kind of typically what we do. Of course, one, welcoming everyone to the webinar. We've missed you. We've been off for a week, but during that time, we went on a road trip, and I know many of us were probably on some type of vacation last week. But then we will start off with a census update from Genesis. Then Dr. Lila Valencia will walk us through the data and self-response in Texas. And then I will go over a quick overview of our road trip that we had 2 weeks ago. And then, of course, as always, if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat box as well, and we'll plan to answer your questions as we go through the material. But without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Genesis to give us an update on census.
Hi, Katie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Irma Samaripa, and I'm here on behalf of Genesis. She's having a meeting right now, so I work with her. Oh, you're here?
I'm here. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
Got this. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Genesis here again. Thank you so much, Irma. She was ready and waiting to support me, but here I am. I hope everybody's doing well and staying safe. I know things, especially in different parts of Texas, are getting a little heavier with COVID resurgence. So I just want to make sure and share that. I hope everybody is doing well. Next slide, please. So I pulled together kind of just a quick glance of what is the status of current operations. This is mostly reflecting those that are part of Texas. There are some, for example, there's update leave that happens in Puerto Rico, for example, and that's a slightly different operation than the one that happened stateside. So I just pulled this together for folks. I'm not going to cover it because it's just a lot of repeating the dates, but in case folks wanted to see something at a quick glance. Next slide, please. As a reminder, so update leave is pretty much completely done. As of June 18th, the Bureau has shared that it was 96% complete. And then in addition, one exciting thing is that the U.S. Census Bureau plans on mailing a 6 reminder postcard. And those postcards are set to arrive to homes that haven't responded between July 22nd to 28th. So keep this in mind, especially as folks, you're trying to re-engage folks in the field. If they're receiving another invitation, this is a perfect moment for kind of advocacy to say, hey, if you're receiving more invitations, it's because you haven't responded. And they're also planning on sending a postcard reminder to 1.3 million PO boxes, and that operation has already started and should be pretty much complete. There may be some delays because of USPS, but hopefully, again, another moment of advocacy to show folks like, hey, you're getting more reminders. That's because you haven't responded. Next slide. This is just a quick takeaway slide, and these are linked as well at the bottom. These are the postcards and the reminders and what they look like, so you can anticipate, especially in those areas where folks have not responded, you can anticipate what they look like. They're very much, typical US Census Bureau mailings, not a lot of pictures, just a lot of words, but just know that this is what they look like. Next slide. Additional operations that we wanted to kind of, I wanted to make sure people were aware of is that the Bureau is conducting some follow-up calls to some households that have already responded. The idea behind this is, if, for instance, like people have filled it out, but they left some parts pretty incomplete, they may follow up just to say, hey, we just want to make sure that this additional information is completed. So just know that these calls may be happening. And it is a little confusing, and that's why we want to mention it, because you may get questions about it. In addition, in August, going through October 31st, there's going to be a non-response follow-up re-interview. So if a household is counted in NERFU, they may, in that non-response follow-up, when the enumerators go door to door, they may have a second census taker go just to ensure quality control. And so this may happen. We don't know to what extent it will, but just know that we're just putting that on your radar as of now. In addition, in September, the Bureau does this pretty frequently because they do so many surveys. So they'll have a post-enumeration survey from September 23rd through December 22nd. And again, this is just to kind of get a gauge of who's currently living in the housing unit, and then whether or not there may have been someone who was there or not there on April 1st, but is now there. And so that gives them an opportunity to kind of gauge some of the changes that are happening in this moment. And then in addition, it'll kind of give a sense of who's moved out of the household between April 1st and the time of that interview. And so just as a reminder, when we're talking about enumerators and contact from the Census Bureau, we want to not talk in absolutes, right? Because we're living obviously in a pandemic, but things change so frequently, and the Bureau is adapting to these current circumstances. And so we want to make sure to remind folks that self-responding decreases the likelihood of a visit or contact from a US Census Bureau enumerator, but it doesn't altogether eliminate the possibility. Next slide. In addition, the Bureau last week announced that we knew that they were going to be hosting a soft launch of NERFU, and the idea behind this, again, quality control and to ensure that their systems and operations are going to be running smoothly, especially as we're facing COVID-19. And so they may have a second launch in late July, but we'll see. We'll learn more about that pretty soon here. But the first launch has already been announced, and these are places in Minnesota, in the Philadelphia region, Atlanta region. So you can see the whole list here. I'm not going to go through it. So unfortunately, they didn't pick any city in Texas, but hopefully, because we have a pretty substantial nationwide network, our hope is that folks will be able to give us a sense of how it went, and not just from the Census Bureau sides, but also from, census advocate side, kind of to understand what happened and how it went and what to keep an eye out. So their census taker training begins on July 7th, and then these enumerators are going to be knocking on doors starting July 16th. In addition, the Bureau has said that they're going to be providing PPE and hand sanitizer. But one thing that is alarming and that we're keeping an eye on is that they're not requiring universal mask wearing. They've said that they will require it if the local or statewide mandate is that they should be wearing a mask. So we would want to see universal mask wearing rate because it's so confusing already. And so, and we just want to ensure clarity across all these different, all the different ACOs and all the different operations. So we'll keep you updated on that as well, because what we anticipate is that in Texas, NERFU will not begin until August 11th, unless it's part of the second launch, but even then, we're unsure. Next slide. So I'll leave you all with kind of these opportunities for census outreach. So the Bureau is going to be having what they call search weeks of action in July and in early August. Texas is included in the week of July 20th to 26th. They're not heavily advertising this, so if you do want to participate in some kind of action, you should reach out to your coordinator or specialist yourself. Don't wait for them to reach out to you. And this is going to hold true, we think, through the end of the Census Bureau period, simply because the specialists and coordinators are, they're doing a lot of work, and so they may need you to nudge them before they can nudge you. In addition, just keep in mind that we should be sending out kind of a unified message between July 28th and July 30th, where between July 22nd and 28th is that last mailed reminder. July 28th will be a NERFU Day of Action, and then August 11th is when NERFU begins. So the reason we want to make sure to have a day of action prior to that August 11th date is because we want to make sure that people who haven't had a chance to respond do respond and get taken off of the Bureau's kind of universe in terms of like who will get knocked on, etc. And then in addition, Univision is hosting their Census Week of Action this week. So if you do have a contact there and you have an idea, feel free to reach out to them. This is a great opportunity, especially to reach Spanish-speaking folks who haven't responded yet. And then lastly, Faith and Public Life is hosting their Faithful Census Week of Action this week. And I'm including their social media toolkit. So if you or a partner have an opportunity to share a message, please do so. And I'll make sure to put all these links into the chat in just a moment here. Thanks, everybody.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Genesis, for sharing out. And as she said, she'll be putting all of those links to those resources and materials into the chat box on the Zoom. It doesn't look like we have any questions at the moment, but if anyone does have any questions, again, feel free to pop those into the Q&A box or in the chat box as well. Now we are going to switch gears and pass the mic over to Dr. Lila Valencia, who is going to walk us through the self-response data.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm happy to bring you some data updates. Next slide, please. On this first slide, I usually just put some of the resources that we're using to produce some of these data for you. And these are also resources that are available for you to monitor your own self-response in your areas. Next slide, please. So we ended last week. All of these data updates that I'm providing to you are for the date of July 1st. July 3rd was a holiday for the Census Bureau, so we don't have data that would have been updated for July 2nd. Today we'll get data updated as of yesterday. So look for that later on today after 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. But as of July 1st, Texas has a response rate of 56.6% compared to the national response rate of 61.9%. So we're still a little bit over 5 percentage points behind the national average. We are tied for 40th. We have been tied for 40th since last week. We are really hoping to catch up to Mississippi. Mississippi is about 0.3 percentage points away from us. I think it's within reach. But across the country, 91.5 million households have responded, and 6.9 million of those are in Texas. 6.9 was a new milestone that we reached this last week. We were at 6.8 million for a long time. And it can get a little bit dull looking at these numbers because they don't move a lot. Because Texas has such a large population, our denominator is a lot larger, so it takes bigger jumps to really move these rates and these households that are counted. For us, they're in the millions, but for other states, they're in the hundreds of thousands, and so it's easier for them to see that movement. But that's why it's even more important for Texas to really put forth as big an effort as their population size. And I think, like I said, we went up a percentage point since last week. We actually went up a full percentage point, both nationally and statewide, since the last time we met with you before our Texas Counts road trip. Next slide, please. And this is the daily increase. You'll recall that now we are not getting data during the weekend, and so there's some blanks in the response rate there. Some of those blanks are also just zero differences in increase and actual increase. But again, we are at 56.6%, about 5.3 percentage points behind the national average, and our post-census day average is about 0.2 percentage points. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, before we move to that next slide, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a jump right around June 15th. When we were going through the Texas Counts road trip and we were looking at the data, we noticed that jump in many of the communities that we were looking at. And so I just wanted to point that out to you. If there were local efforts that you are aware of that took place around that date, whatever you were doing was really working. It was working nationally as well as in the state. So we know that this is probably also a Census Bureau driven effort. And so if you are working closely with your partnership specialist, maybe get together, try to recall what it was that those efforts were, because they really resulted in a pretty significant jump. Like I mentioned to you, our post-census day average increase daily is about 0.2 percentage points. On that day, we saw a 0.5 percentage increase. And so we want to make sure that we continue with those sorts of efforts where we can see some real effectiveness in raising that response rate. Next slide, please. So here's a Texas view in the different Texas counties. And as you can see, we have fewer and fewer dark burnt orange counties, which is great. That means that our response rate is increasing all across the state. Texas now has 94 counties that have a 50% plus response rate. That means more than half of their households have been counted and responded to the census. And so we know that there are other counties that are right on the verge of meeting this milestone. And that verge is they're like at 49.9, 49.8. And so if you are in Nacogdoches, Colorado, or Fayette counties, whatever you're doing, keep working at it. You're really close to that milestone. And we want to see you in the 94 plus counties that are over that 50% milestone. Next slide, please. Here we list the rankings, right? You can see where we are right behind Mississippi at 56.6. They have a 56.9. We have been tied with Arkansas for quite a while now. So we really want to make sure that we are pushing that response rate in our areas. Fort Bend is now leading Rockwall County in Texas with 68.7%. And you can see all of those very suburban area counties leading the way. And then we see a lot of suburban cities. During the Texas Counts road trip, we got to meet the mayor of Mountain City, who has been leading the response rate in Texas amongst all cities for quite a while now. And they are at 88.5%. Then you have cities like Garden Ridge and Chavano Park, all in the San Antonio area. And then what we are also seeing is when you can pick out the total daily increase, what we are finding is that small counties and small cities are having those larger daily increases. And they are the ones that are helping to drive up that count right now for Texas. Loving County, which is the smallest county in Texas, excuse me, and Burleson County had the highest daily increases. Burleson had a 1 percentage point increase in just one day, and Loving County increased in one day between June 31st and July 1st by over 1.8 percentage points. Millers Point, Hillcrest, Somerset, Robstown, Liverpool, and Cameron all had daily increases of over 1.5 percentage points. So yay, these are some small cities, right? But we know that Robstown is a bigger city. And so we are seeing most of this growth in response rate coming from smaller areas, but we also have standouts like Robstown that are really pushing that response rate. Next slide. So we also know, like Genesis mentioned, the update leave operation has resumed in all parts of Texas. Many of the area census offices started the resumption of the update leave operations between May 25th and June 8th. And so now what we're doing is really looking to see what sorts of increases are we seeing in response rate now that these households that had not heard from the Census Bureau until now, you know, is that working? Are they responding? And the answer is yes. So the response rate for some of these are the counties with the biggest jumps in update leave since update leave was reinstated in their area till now. So what I've posted here is the response rate as of July 1st for each of these counties, and then the increases that they've seen since update leave was resumed in their area. And so you can see Motley went up 28.6 percentage points. So they had a response rate of about 8 percentage points, and they have, or 18 percentage points, and they have really gone up. You see also an increase of about 10 percentage points for Mason County. And so you can see all of these counties are seeing big jumps in their response rates. So continue letting people know in these areas that update leave is, the operation is nearly completed. They should have received their Census Bureau package by now at their front step, at their front door, and they should definitely respond as soon as they can. Next slide, please. On this slide, I wanted to make you aware of a new statistic that the CUNY Hard to Count map has provided. They have added the number of households per day that an area needs to reach to attain their 2010 final self-response rate by the end of July, by July 31st. And so basically what we're seeing here is that, for instance, in Robstown that saw that big daily increase not too long ago, what they need to do to reach their 2010 final self-response of 62% is they need to reach out to 8.9 households per day. If 8.9 households, well, they don't need to reach out to just 8.9. They need to make sure that 8.9 of the households that they reach out to every day respond to the census before the end of July, and they will be able to reach that 62%. And so this is a really useful statistic that really helps to monitor what, the effectiveness of the census efforts that you are seeing on the ground, or that you're implementing census efforts that are put on by the Census Bureau. And all of this specific statistic is available at the county, at the city, and at the census tract level. So go into your maps, into your areas, click on the area of interest for you, and you can see that statistic there. And I think that's going to be really helpful. You'll see 8.9 households, can sound a little bit high, right? But it's not unattainable. And it's a pretty, 8.9 is actually a pretty high number compared to what we've seen in other areas. On the next slide, I can show you a little bit more about what those data can look like in Texas. So for instance, here are the counties that are closest to meeting their 2010 milestone. And so you can see Jackson County is less than a percentage point away from their 2010 milestone. Burnett County is 2 percentage points away. And what that means for them is that basically they need to call and make sure that at least one household of the households that they reach out to, that they text to, that they provide information to, responds to the census every single day, and they will reach their 2010 goal before the end of July. So you can see here that these are the counties that are closest to meeting their 2010 milestone, and they really have to reach and ensure that about 3 households per day respond to the Census Bureau. I think it's a really useful statistic that kind of lets you know and gauge not only the success of your efforts, but also gives you a workable goal and, to be able to try to reach. And you can see that some of these counties here are not just small counties. Parker County, Hood County, Kendall County, those are all suburban counties around the Dallas area and Kendall around the San Antonio area. And they are still just needing to reach, less than a handful of households per day. So just wanted to put that out there for you. I think it's a really useful statistic. If you haven't seen it yet, go check out your maps and see how much you need to, who you need to reach to or reach out to, and how many of those households you need to ensure respond to the census so you can reach that 2010 goal. Next slide, please. Here, just want to remind you once again, share out our daily updates on the response rates. I think it really helps to bring some recognition to the work that you're doing, as well as to let people know that we are chugging along, but there's still work to do in Texas in terms of response rates. I typically like to, call out a couple of counties that are doing really, really well, or, challenge a couple of counties that are close to reaching a certain goal or a certain milestone. So I encourage you to take a look at our social media and consider reposting and sharing on your social media as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lila, for sharing out a lot of really great data, but also really useful ways to use that data. So thanks again for joining us and sharing out. And again, if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A box. Now I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the virtual road trip that we went on 2 weeks ago. On the next slide, I wanted to start off with just a big, big, big thank you. I know that so many of you who are tuning in right now, and maybe some folks that aren't tuning in, did a lot of really great work around the road trip. So whether you served as a kickoff speaker or hosted a virtual event or in-person safe event, or even if you were just talking about the census to your friends and family, or maybe scheduling some Facebook posts or tweets, I just wanted to say a big, big thank you from Texas Counts for helping us slowly move the needle to get all Texans counted on the 2020 census. On the next slide, for folks that didn't know, or just a reminder, we went on a road trip across the state of Texas. And so each day of the week, we were highlighting different voices and efforts happening on the ground in those different regions. As you may remember, on Monday, we went to East Texas and the Gulf Coast. On Tuesday, we went down south to the Valley in South Texas. On Wednesday, we went out west, visited West Texas, the Permian Basin and the Panhandle. Thursday, we were in North Texas, and then we finished up the week in Central Texas and the Hill Country. Again, we were so lucky to have so many amazing efforts led by local leaders and the Census Bureau across the state of Texas 2 weeks ago. And I'm really excited to share out some of those great efforts in a little bit. On the next slide, I did want to kind of share out kind of what our road trip formula was and why I think we had some success during the road trip. And the first just being that outreach, resources, and support piece. And so at Texas Counts, as you know, you probably had an opportunity to either tune into a weekly update call or a planning session, or had access to the toolkit. And then at Texas Counts, what we really wanted to do is just try and provide you as many kind of resources and support that you might need to really launch efforts. But then really the secret sauce comes from all of our trusted voices that led efforts on the ground. And so although we might have provided a framework or an opportunity or to really get this road trip up and going, really the true champions of the road trip were those local trusted voices on the ground who were reminding their communities about the importance of the 2020 census, leading efforts, serving as speakers. And so just kind of with those two things combined, really, I think we did have some really great success in terms of getting out the message to our communities. On the next slide, when we look specifically at the numbers, I did want to share out just a couple of things that were exciting throughout the course of the week. So of course, we had 5 days of Get Out the Count efforts. We had 6 kickoff events throughout the course of the week. And on those 6 kickoff events, we actually had 54 different kickoff speakers, again, proudly representing their communities and talking about the importance of the census. With those kickoff events, we had over 5,000 people tune in. That's a lot of people to tune in. Typically for our weekly update calls, we get around 100. And so the fact that we were able to reach that many people 2 weeks ago was really, really exciting for us. Throughout the course of the week, we had over 60 road trip events planned. And again, these were our amazing local census champions who were either leading virtual events or safe in-person events in their communities. Throughout the course of the week, we also had hundreds of trusted messengers who were talking about the census to folks in their community, tuning in, sharing out. And then of course, we had lots and lots of social media postings happening throughout the course of last week as well. And as a reminder, for the toolkit, the road trip toolkit, it is still live and still accessible. So if you are wanting to use any of those graphics that were shared throughout the course of last week, please know that those are still available for you, and we encourage you to share them out as well. In terms of events that were actually happening last week, there were so many, but I did just want to pull out a couple of the different events we had. So in West Texas, they had a big Census Church Challenge where they were playing Loteria. They had an Elvis impersonator, which was really fun to tune into. In the right upper hand corner was just an example of what our kickoff events looked like. Bottom right were these amazing murals that were going and that were being displayed and painted in Harris County in Houston. And then of course in South Texas, there's another Loteria event. There's a lot of virtual Loteria played throughout the course of the road trip, which is really exciting. And I was happy to get to tune in. On the next slide, just some more examples of some events that were shared. We had a lot of local musicians go live from their communities and promoting the 2020 census, but also gracing our ears with their fabulous music. Northeast Texas had a full day of events. They had scavenger hunts and looking at ancestry records and the top things to do. We had our local radio stations involved. There's Elvis in the middle, and probably one of the highlights of that week was the city of Arlington went live from the new stadium there from Globe Life Field, and it was really cool just to see the stadium, but also have the voice of the Texas Rangers speaking and the mayor talking about the importance of the 2020 census. On the next slide, again, just wanting to highlight some of the amazing work that was happening throughout the course of that week. We had Census champions proudly representing their communities. We had giveaways. We had safe in-person events where folks were assisting with filling out the census questionnaire. We had virtual Zumba, but probably one of my favorite memories from last week was on our Valley, South Texas kickoff event. We actually had a census caravana start during the kickoff event, which was really exciting. And here's just an image from that event that took place. So again, lots of really exciting, creative, thoughtful efforts happening across our state last week. And again, just a big, big thank you to all of our census champions that were participants or led these efforts. On the next slide, kind of one of our small victories from that week is, as you may know, we started the week with Texas ranking number 41 out of all the states in responding to the 2020 census. And just again, through all of those different efforts led by census champions across the state, Texas is now ranked number 40, as Dr. Valencia shared, but we know that we are not that far behind behind Mississippi in terms of continuing to move our state up in the rankings. And so as a reminder, there are still millions of households in our state that still need to respond to the 2020 census. And so although we had a great road trip, we know this work is going to continue into October. And so again, I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in on these weekly update calls as we continue getting out the message about the 2020 census here in Texas. On the next slide, you might be thinking, now what? I know that is something that I personally have been thinking. We put a lot of planning into that road trip. And so we know that the census is going to continue. Folks can continue to respond into October. And I did want to share just a couple of initial thoughts and ideas that we have kind of in the pipeline to how we can continue engaging folks and providing you with resources and support to get out the count in your communities. So one, the Texas Counts weekly update call is now every other week. And so we know that the self-response data might not be changing as rapidly as it might have been in previous months, and the operations are also slowing a bit. But do know that we will be here every other Monday sharing out about the 2020 census. So the next time we all meet again on Monday, it will be July 20th, not the 13th. You also are probably receive the Texas Counts weekly update weekly newsletter. We'll be continuing the newsletter, again, just sharing out the most relevant pressing information around the 2020 census. And so know that that resource is still going to be available, even if we're not joining each other virtually on Zoom or Facebook Live every week. We will also be, of course, utilizing our social media channels to promote the 2020 census or share any information or updates or resources. If you haven't already followed Texas Demography, I think that's the right handle. Lila, correct me if I'm wrong, and you can put it in the chat box. But every day they're always sharing the latest self-response data and giving shout outs to cities or counties or egging them on to really up their self-response in their communities. And it's been really helpful for me to follow along with that. So if you aren't already, highly encourage you to follow along. And then when we think more big picture about what potential room for some large efforts like we did with the Texas Counts road trip, we're definitely thinking about, again, how we can get folks re-energized, re-engaged around the 2020 census. So do know that although we might not do something as big as the Texas Counts road trip, we are still looking for ways to where we can connect our communities across the state of Texas to really get folks thinking about the 2020 census again, but of course responding as well. So do know that we're planning to have some things coming down the pipeline. If you do have any ideas or suggestions for how we can continue to move the needle here in Texas, we would love for you to reach out to us at either info@texascounts.org, and I'm sure everyone has my email. It's just martin@everytexan.org as well. But again, just a huge thank you on behalf of Texas Counts for all of your work on the road trip, but also just your continuing work as we try and get every Texan counted on the 2020 census. And now I am going to pause. I don't think that we have any questions. We do have some love from some of our folks on the webinar around the road trip. So thank you for that. But I'm going to pause there to see if we do have any questions. But if not, we'll go ahead and wrap up this weekly update.
We don't have any on Facebook, I can tell you that.
Thanks, Aaron. Great. Well, friends, you know where to find us. On the next slide, I have all of our email addresses. We are always eager and willing to talk about the 2020 census. As I said, we will not be having a weekly update call next week. Our next one will be on July 20th. And a reminder, we'll just be doing these every other week now. But as always, please reach out anytime if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, or really exciting ideas about promoting the 2020 census across Texas. But as Genesis said, I do hope everyone is safe and well during this time. We're thinking about you always. And yeah, we look forward to connecting with everyone again via this weekly update call in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.